Welcome back, Rebels, to season 3 of Creative Rebels.
I'd love to start it in a really positive way, Ad, but I've got a confession to make.
All right, Usher, go on.
I'm a fraud.
What have you done?
Well, in this episode, I was listening back to it today, and I start talking about Stephen Pressfield and the War of Art and how he talks about the resistance, which is basically what stops you from doing your creative work.
Yeah.
And I'm going on about how what I do is I identify when I'm feeling the resistance and then I'm able to battle it. Dude, I have not properly painted for so long, and I've really been sitting in it today. Listening back to this episode has really helped because we really go into sabotage, which is what Emma's latest book is about, of how we sabotage ourselves and we want to be doing the creative stuff, but we find all of these ways and reasons not to do it. A lot of it's been we've had a lot of podcast work that we've had to do that's been taking a lot of my time. But I think one of the worst things that I did was when you interviewed me, I counted up how many paintings I'd made, and I counted up that there'd been 98, and then I made this big sort of hoo-ha about doing 98 in 1 year. And then it got to the new year, and all of a sudden, because I'd counted it up and I'd kind of written off, there was this stop point of the new year. So it didn't flow into me, I just create. I'd got this number, and now I was aware of, because everyone was sending me messages going, oh, you're going to do 100 this year, or try for 150, or and all of a sudden it killed my creativity. I haven't created for probably about 2 weeks. I've half done a canvas and painted one street piece, and I'm just in a funk.
Do you think that's because you don't have a goal? Because I know you're so goal driven, you're so stubborn about, I'm going to do this and it's going to happen, that when you started painting last year, you had yourself the goal of, I want to try and hit 10K on Instagram. And then when kind of lockdown hit, you were like, okay, well, I'm going to try and create as much paintings as possible. You'd really set that out of this is what I want to achieve in a certain time frame. Whereas as soon as that new year ticks over, because everything had led up to the end of that last year, now it's you're oh, well, I haven't actually set a new goal for myself. So it's kind of oh, well, yeah. And it's just kind of fallen away.
Yeah. And all of a sudden starting back at number 1, I think I should maybe start from 98 and work from there, because what had happened before, I had set those goals, but then it had just become habit. And I'd got into the practice of, and I spoke about it in my episode, treating it like work rather than my hobby. And then all of a sudden, when I stopped for Christmas and New Year, I broke my habit pattern, and I haven't been able to get them started again. And reading Emma's book has been really useful in that the things that I'm doing, I don't understand the reasons why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. I haven't got that deep into my brain of, I don't know why I'd rather sit here and watch YouTube videos and scroll Instagram in under the guise of doing work than I would rather go up and start painting. I think a lot of it is it's been really rainy, so my only option has been canvases, and canvases don't excite me. But that shouldn't stop me. The fact that they don't excite me as much as painting on outside and the energy of creating outside shouldn't be the thing that holds me back. I should say, I am hardworking. This is my work. This is the project in front of me, and I need to just get back into that habit.
And I think it's really important to remind yourself that it's the process that you love. And it's getting back into that, being actually, even though it's raining and I can't do that there, how can I find a way to enjoy the process doing it elsewhere? I think as soon as you can find that, then it almost doesn't matter. And even if it's okay, well, if it is pissing down rain outside and you can't paint in the studio, you don't want to do a canvas, what else can you do that could be fun, that could also help drive that forward? Can you spend a while trying to find new walls? Can you put some designs together, do some research on getting some stuff that then as soon as the weather clears and you can actually go straight out again, you've got everything that you need ready to go. Even just making sure there's a suitcase there ready now with all the stuff packed exactly. So as soon as it's good, you can just go. And I think making it as easy for yourself as possible to get back into that. And then I suppose that's going to come down to as well, just some forcing yourself into the first couple, because starting that habit up again is going to be hard initially, but then once you're in it, it will be fine and you will be able to keep going.
Yeah. I will check back in this time next week, and I'll let you know how it's going, because I am determined to get out of this. So moving on to more positive things, it's our bloody season 3. Series 3. God,
it is.
Messed it up.
Yes. Boom.
It's our series 3, and I am very excited for this. The third year, the magic year, the year when it all happens. I mean, I think we have to a degree sort of supercharged our first 2 years and seen a lot of success with the podcast. I think when we give the 3-year formula, it does involve a lot of learning if it's your first endeavor. And for us, we had a lot of those
Yeah.
lessons under our belt already, so we were able to sort of do things a little bit quicker. But I am super excited with just sticking it out for 3 years and moving into our third year, still being here, still providing value, people sharing the podcast, telling their friends about it, and just growing and helping as many people as possible.
I think what's interesting as well is how you were talking about the number of paintings that you'd done and how resetting back to one was a hard thing to do. That's what we do every year with this podcast. It's like, this is season 3, episode 1. So we're kind of starting again, and we could have a huge tally that adds up. But I think it's nice not to have that huge number as being something that's always there, always kind of like in the background. It's remembering like, why am I doing this? It's because I actually enjoy doing it. It doesn't matter how many I create. As long as I keep doing it consistently and I keep enjoying the process, then that's what I should be aiming for rather than just a number.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to continue bringing you the best show that we're humanly capable of. We really appreciate anyone's feedback. I've been answering lots of questions on Creative Rebels Instagram at the moment. So at Rebels Create, if you guys have ever got any business questions that we can help you with. We've got an apology to make for everyone who tried to sign up to Access last week and sent us a message saying, am I being stupid? No, you were not being stupid. Our website was down, but it is now up. You can go to creativerebels.co/access to attend our next event, which is when?
Our next event is on February 2nd. So only 2 weeks' time from when this is coming out. And I think that's one thing I'm super looking forward to in 2021 is the fact that hopefully the world will open up again and we can start doing these Access events in person. But for now, we're going to continue to do them online. So we generally do our sessions where the first part of it will be me and David doing a talk on a certain topic around the creative entrepreneur kind of field. And then we'll take Q&A. So if you've got any questions, if you need any help with your creative business, any help with your just creative passion, like even if you just need some advice on something, like come along, we're happy to answer those questions. And yeah, they're always really fun. Like the last few we've done have been really great. It's a really great chance to like form a community as well, because I know like off the back of the last one, I kind of sent everyone who kind of wanted to be involved in it a kind of a link to everyone else's Instagram accounts, and they all started networking from there. So it's really nice to see the community coming together, and I can't wait for this year because it means that we're actually going to be able to get the community together in real life at these Access events in person when we eventually get there.
Hopefully. We'll see. But yes, for now, it's over Zoom. We invite you guys up on stage so you can actually ask your question in person rather than just through text. And they are a lot of fun and we're really looking forward to it. So it's a real opportunity for us. Although through the show, we talk about things that we think will affect everyone in certain ways. Through Access, we're able to actually answer your specific questions. So you can tell us that you've got a cake shop that does this and this is what you're struggling with, and we'll be able to dive down on what a cake shop should actually do rather than what the generic advice is for everyone. So yeah, come along. They're always fun and great place to network and hang out with us.
It's a fun event. If you know any other creators out there who might benefit from this, like, or just want a nice thing to do in the evening, because there's not too much to do at the moment, so get a friend to sign up too, and yeah, all come along because it'll be really fun.
We got posted on someone's Instagram story today and they wrote a really lovely message, which was basically, I love this podcast. These guys are genuinely trying to help creatives and they're not selling anything. It was posted by Daniel Crossan, who is a regular listener to the show. And it really meant a lot to me. It's like, we do obviously have a motive for this show and it does have to earn money in order to survive. But we don't sell to you guys. We do partnerships and that's how we stay afloat with the podcast. But really, like, genuinely, it is our goal to empower you guys to lead a more beautiful life. And we think that it is totally a possible thing that we've managed to do and we want other people to do. One of the things, talking with Emma in this episode, and like, bless Emma, I'm so, like, she's such a wonderful person and I love having these chats with her, and I'm so glad that she's part of this show, like a regular annual guest. And one thing she was talking about is just, once you have that success, like the need to share it with other people and lift other people up and see their success as well.
Yeah.
It really is like one of the most incredible things to experience. And when we see the success of you listeners and the amazing projects that you're doing, it really does like warm our heart, or whatever saying you want to apply to it. Like it means the absolute world to us. So I just want to thank everyone for listening. And also, I do also want to call out you if you're listening and you're being too lazy and you're getting in your own way and you enjoy listening to this show, but you haven't pulled the trigger yet. Like now's the time, especially if you've been listening for the past 2 years, or if you're a new listener and you've just started, like now's the time to pull the trigger. Do the thing that you love.
I think now's the perfect time to do that mentally, and it's also the perfect time to do it economically. I feel like we're in such a bad economical place in the country right now, and the world is, that as things get better going forward, things will accelerate. So if you can start now and make a bit of a success now, in the future, it's going to do so much better. And I think starting now when things are hard is going to give you the best chance to go forward. Like when we first started our business, it was back after the last major recession, and it was super hard at the start, but we learned so much, especially with like marketing yourself, getting your name out there when you've not got the money to do it. So you have to think of creative ways to do that. So if you can set yourself the task now, like the challenge for 2021 of being like, this is the year I'm going to start my thing. If you can start it now and make it a success now, you're going to be so much better set for the future than someone who starts in a year's time when things are a bit more normal again.
I 100% agree with that. It's the counterintuitive thing. Do not start a business when the world is in turmoil, but that's exactly the time to start, because everyone else is thinking, I better not start now because the world is in turmoil. So you will have a head start on everyone that doesn't start, and it means that when things do pick up, you'll have your systems in place. Everything, like you will just see so much growth. And for us, when we managed to survive the previous recession, it was like as soon as that went away, we had no idea that our business was going to like skyrocket like it did. But again, it came
Yeah.
after 3 years of establishing ourselves, learning what we were doing, figuring business out. And then all of a sudden at the end of that 3 years, it coincides with things starting to get back on track in the country economically. It's just like, oh, we are fully capable of taking on these briefs that are coming in with big money for global brands. It's like, yes, we can do this because we've been practicing for 3 years when these briefs were few and far between because there wasn't many people out there. It's the perfect training ground for us to get started.
So definitely get started now, because now is the best time, and also the best time to start the season 3 of our podcast. So let's get going.
Yes, we have obviously Emma Gannon returning for a record-breaking third time to launch Series 3 of Creative Rebels. Emma is a best-selling author, podcast host, speaker, and one of our favourite humans. Emma's recent book, Sabotage, dives into the strange tendency of creatives to ruin their work, either consciously or subconsciously, and how to get out of your own way.
In this episode, we talk about the positives of 2020, new ways of working, and sabotage.
What happens with sabotage is sometimes we sabotage things because we're not necessarily scared of rejection. We're scared of our dreams coming true.
Hi, Emma Gannon.
Hello, I'm so excited to be back on your brilliant podcast. Third time running.
Welcome back again. Third time lucky, some might say.
I know, really, really happy to be back. And I was actually thinking about you guys the other day, and when you were launching that podcast and you wanted it to be #1 in the iTunes charts, and then it was, and then now look at it. Very exciting.
Yeah, it's been a long time since those days.
We survived. We're still here.
Yeah, it's like 3 years has gone quite quickly. And do you remember we were talking about the 3-year rule?
Yeah, literally in that episode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is our magic year. So hopefully, yeah, magic things start to happen this year. I listened back to the episode that we did last year, right on the cusp of the beginning of 2020, when we were so young,
So naive.
so carefree, and we had no idea what was about to hit the fan.
I know, and I honestly feel like a completely different person, and I don't know if you guys do as well, but so much has happened this year, so much growth in such a horrible time. Just feel like a lot has sped up, I suppose.
Yeah, do you think that's because people have just had time to sit with their thoughts and work out what's important to them?
I think so. It's weird because I have no photos and documentation of this year. Sorry, last year, 2020. So it felt like this year that didn't exist, but at the same time, so much internal stuff happened. So I don't have anything to show for it. Like my iPhone is just, there's nothing on it. But yeah, a lot happened in my own head, and I'm kind of thankful for that in a weird way.
Well, we kind of spoke before, like when we were setting up the interview, we sort of said, if we're going to talk about the pandy, then let's not focus on the negative because that's been done to death. So, what are some things that brought you joy during this time?
Yeah, I like that this was a question because I suppose I did want to caveat as well that we're talking about positive things in terms of maybe creative work and life and our mental health. I can't find any positives in terms of the pandemic and the actual horrors of it. But in terms of being someone who could spend a bit of time slowing down, because I am a really busy person, and I know that's, busy is not a badge of honor, and we know that, but I so got caught up in that trap of a busy diary means productive means successful. And I wasn't productive last year, and I had to sit with that and make peace with that, and also feel bored again. I hadn't felt bored for years, and I'd read all those think pieces and those like research pieces in the New York Times saying that boredom creates your most creative thoughts, and I was like, I don't believe it. And now I can say, no, that is true. That is true.
I run away from like actively run away from boredom. It's the one thing that I cannot stand. And even during the pandy, I ran away from it and made sure that I self-isolated up on the roof of the studio and was just painting every day because I can't sit in that boredom. It's I mean, you can tell me and like I love you and respect you, Emma, but like you could tell me all day long to be bored. I can't. It's the one thing that I have to get away from. I always have to be active brainly. I can't meditate. I can't sit and focus. I'm like a nightmare.
But in a way, it's really good that you could just channel it like that, because I think the reason I was bored is because I had a huge creative block. I was so blocked. I couldn't write. I had no new ideas. I realized that all my ideas pretty much come from being with my friends, being in the pub, sitting on the bus, looking out of the window, going traveling. I get all my ideas on planes and trains. I know that sounds probably lucky that I get them that way, but it's true. Like I get my ideas from being in the world, and I couldn't write my next novel, I felt, because I didn't have anything. I literally had nothing, like no stimulus. And it's come back now, thank God. But I just wanted to be honest about that with people who were like, oh my God, so, what are you working on? And I was like, nothing. This is awful. But I found a way now to unblock myself during these times, which I feel like so powerful now. I'm like, oh, I can be creative. It's just I needed to find a new way.
And what way was it that you found to unblock that?
Well, I went back to Julia Cameron, the saint of all creativity. I guess you guys have heard of The Artist's Way and her other books, but I had to find a routine. I was never someone that had a routine. I was just like, I've always got ideas. I've got them coming out of every single Google Doc I own. But then I had to get up in the mornings, write the 3 pages that she says you should write, the morning pages, get out all of the gunk that was in my head, and also work with what I had. Like the most creative thoughts do come through limitation and restriction. 100%. So my new idea is actually set in my hometown. It was going to be set in New York. And I was like, well, I can change the location, and I can use this base of memories that I have. I don't need to go out and about to get new ideas. I need to, just work with what I already have. And that was a challenge, but it was good.
I think something interesting there, because I remember listening to a travel blogger talk years ago, and I've mentioned it before in the show about how this traveler was like, he travels all around the world, does all these amazing things. And he was saying, like, if you can't afford to do that and you're just at home, remember that to everyone else in the world, where you live is a foreign place, that somewhere they haven't been before. So I think people forget how important where they live actually is, because the world is huge. And especially if you think like potentially America's going to read this thing, they're probably going to find a little town in England more interesting than New York, which is the same place that everything else they read is being created about.
Exactly. And you don't need huge topics to be creative. Like Julia Cameron always says, go to your local park, write about the dog wearing the coat, write about the leaf write about the dad sitting on the bench who's crying because his kid just fell over. And it's just like all of this stuff. Like, the world is so interesting. And another thing that I hadn't really done until last year was listen to music, like fully listen to a whole album of music, things like that. I mean, maybe I sound a bit mental, but I just feel like I've had really big highs and some lows, but really big highs of like walking in the park and just being like, wow, it's crazy.
It's funny you said music there, because I've definitely rediscovered music in the past year, because like I remember I suppose it's the last time I had a big amount of free time was when I was at uni. So like 12 years ago or something. And I used to spend so much time finding new music, like searching around for stuff. And I just loved it. I like absolutely loved it. But then work gets busy and like life carries on, and you kind of don't find time to do that anymore. It's like computer games. I used to play loads of computer games, literally can't find an hour to play a computer game now. But over the last year, I've managed to find, like, I've kind of made time to find new bands, find new music. And I found like this whole genre of music that I didn't know existed. I'm like, oh my God, amazing. This is a new band. This is a new band. And I've got like so much like hype from just being able to find and rediscover this kind of thing that I used to love.
Yeah, I love that.
Adam loves one-man bands with the drum on the back, and they walk around making the noise.
Yeah, anything that's got a tuba in,
isn't it?
So good.
A tuba.
But that's really important in a world of algorithms and targeted adverts. Like the idea that you can go and stumble across stuff, and I kind of missed that, I guess.
Have you read? Because I think a lot of it overlaps with Julia's work. But have you read The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield?
Obsessed. I discovered that in lockdown as well. I've discovered quite a lot of stuff. Audiobooks have been a bit of a savior, because that, I guess, means you have to go on like the 4-hour walk, not the 1-hour walk, which I've been doing, and just completely getting involved in them. But yeah, love his books. They're quite fast paced and like aggressively American guru, but the actual content has really resonated with me. And actually, when I wrote Sabotage, I thought, this is so interesting that I'd never discovered Stephen Pressfield's work, because I'm kind of saying what he's saying, but just in a different way.
Yeah, I think as soon as I had that label of, he calls it resistance, as soon as I could name it, then I could start to fight it. And it wasn't until I read that and I put the name. So for anyone who hasn't read it, he basically, procrastination, or anything that stands in the way of you doing the actual work, which is the most important thing. The work is the most important thing. Anything that stands in the way of that, he calls resistance. And so if I am scrolling on Instagram or looking out the window or under my covers or whatever it is, and I'm not doing the work, and Instagram's like such a killer, because that's where you feel like, I feel like I am working, or it's bullshit. I justify it to myself that I'm working. And specifically, I said to myself at the beginning of this year, like, let me have a go at Instagram, like get it successful, which I've done. But I wanted to do it by not spending any time on Instagram. I wanted it to be by putting that time into the work as opposed to into the social media. And I've done that. But then I'll find myself aimlessly scrolling. And as soon as I can go, that's the resistance. Like, why am I doing this and not getting up on the roof and having a paint?
Yeah.
So now that I've identified it, I can fight it.
It's so funny, because in Stephen's book, he said something like, amateurs tweet and writers write. And I was so triggered. I was like, how dare you? I still love tweeting. I do think it's like a writer's home, even though it's toxic and blah, blah, blah. Like, just tweeting a little thought is like that. Writers enjoy that. But yeah, he was right. If I'm spending the whole day tweeting, yeah, I'm not doing my work. And I love that he calls people out for that.
And I suppose on that as well, it's like, are you tweeting and then looking for the response and being sat there for another half an hour watching stuff? Or are you tweeting and leaving? Because I feel like if you tweet and leave, that's fine, because you're not actually spending any time on there procrastinating. You're providing a bit of content to your audience and then going away. Whereas I feel like the trap is, you've posted something, someone's responded, then you get into a conversation, and then you're like, oh, what's this trending topic? You click on that, and then you suddenly go down this rabbit hole of like exactly what Twitter wants you to do.
Exactly. And I've had some really good experiences on Twitter with crowdsourcing ideas. Like, Olive came from a tweet, really, because I put a tweet out there and got loads of replies in like 5 minutes, and realized that when you touch on something, a tweet can go viral because you just know a tweet has touched on something, and I think that can be really useful. So that's great. But yes, so spending all day on Twitter and scrolling through Instagram, you're kind of harming yourself, because you get to the end of the day and you've not really looked at yourself. You've just looked at other people, and you've kind of neglected yourself, basically.
I think the best way to combat that is to, before you open the app, decide what you're going to do on it before you get there. Like, have that plan in advance. Because if you're like, I'm going to go on here and network with 10 people, and you go on it and you do that, then you know you're finished. Whereas if you just open it, hoping that it will give you the answer, that's when you kind of get sucked into it and the procrastination kind of kicks in.
Because I know someone who, and I thought this was crazy at the time, and I didn't get it, and now I kind of do. I have a friend who schedules in time, and I suppose her Instagram is a business account, but she puts it in her diary, like post on Instagram and reply to 20 comments. It's in her calendar. Yeah. I think that's actually quite genius now.
You know, when we're cavemen and we're foraging around and then we find a berry and then we get a huge endorphin rush, that's why I can't do what you just said, is because the sheer joy of randomly going onto social media, stumbling into an account that I've never heard of, and then getting an opportunity from it, or following someone really interesting, or that, and obviously that's why the platforms are designed how they are. That's what sets my brain on fire, and that's what will always keep me coming back to these apps to randomly scroll, because I might find a berry.
But based on what Near EA was saying to us, if you plan that in advance, I'm going to give myself half an hour to randomly scroll, then that's completely fine, because you've set that in advance and you've set your time limit in advance. Whereas you find yourself if you just open it hoping that it's something, you'll find you end up doing that 20 times in a day rather than just the actual half an hour you've given yourself to do it.
That's what I do on emails. Right. That is the whole finding the berry thing, isn't it? Like, we're just rats refreshing and refreshing and refreshing, because every so often you do get an email saying, I'm going to give you loads of money to come to Hawaii or whatever. I haven't had one of those for a while, but your brain remembers that, when actually most of it is just distracting you from doing your stuff.
A tasty piece of email cheese. So you've been off social media a lot more this year and sort of spending more time. You started up your mailing list. How has that been?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed putting my time and effort into the newsletter. I suppose it's like 20% a lot of the cynical stuff that people were saying years ago about how you don't own your audience. We don't own them anyway, but you know what I mean. You don't own the database of people, and if Instagram folded tomorrow, it would be quite tragic for a lot of people. I think that was their community that they spent years building, and that did freak me out. And I heard that on a panel years ago and thought, that is weird. I am working for Instagram for free then, technically, and I don't like that. So that was one thing, but then the other thing was just that I made a list of things that I really love and enjoy at the beginning of last year. And on the top of that list was actually going back to, my 21-year-old self, which was me writing on the internet for free. I love writing for people, and if they want to read it, that was what the blog was. So kind of resurrecting really what I love, which is creating stuff for people and sharing things and being of service and giving valuable links and podcast and recommendations to people. So yeah, I love doing the newsletter, and I think I said this maybe before on the podcast, but it's the one thing I don't want to monetize at all. I don't want it to be, I don't want any adverts near it. Maybe down the line, I'll find a way to monetize it maybe, but I just wanted a space for me again, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. Like, looking back and thinking, what did I really enjoy doing 5 years ago? What did I enjoy doing 10 years ago? Because quite often those things get lost. It's like we were talking about music before. It's like I just stopped, even though I enjoyed it so much. And then now I've refound it and I'm like, why did I ever stop? And I think it is so worth looking back and being like, if I was 5 years ago, what would be my favorite thing? If I was 10 years ago, what would be my favorite thing? And then if they're not in your life currently, maybe try and find a way to bring them back into it.
Because I think that's why people who get quote unquote successful get quite down in the dumps, because they get an agent and they get paid for this stuff and they get all these deals, and then they probably wake up in 5 years' time and realize, I'm not doing the thing I liked and loved and enjoyed, and the thing that brought me joy, the reason I'm even doing all this. And then people get involved and they want to monetize you and they want to grow you. And then you think, I think I was happier when I was on my laptop 10 years ago doing the thing I loved. And so I think you need to make sure that is central to what you always do.
You talk in Sabotage about, I guess it's kind of the most, well, certainly for me, it was the most important piece that I took from the book is getting to know yourself. And I suppose for you, that's that in action is you knowing yourself of I must always have this present of writing for the internet for free for my select group of people who are into what I produce, and always making sure you keep that as the crown jewel and not listening, because I'm sure you have a lot of voices that are trying to push you in various directions.
Exactly that, exactly. And I think you can hide behind that stuff as well. It's quite easy to have other people make decisions for you and for you to just do things because it's easy. And I think actually sometimes we can end up sabotaging our own career when we turn off the voice that says, wait a minute, you're not doing the thing that you actually love doing anymore. What's going on? So yeah, that is important. Just knowing yourself is so important, because otherwise you can get really distracted as well by what other people are doing. And a huge part of sabotage is comparison. It always will be. And I think now that I know what I want for myself, I want other people to have that too. That it's not I look at other people and think I want that, because I know what I want and I'm going to go and do it, and it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. I'm just so happy for other people. I think you can really find joy in watching other people thrive when you get rid of that comparison. And yes, of course, I still have moments of, oh, I would have loved that job, because it's not like we're actors, but your name will probably be put forward for something and someone else will get it. That just happens all the time. But I can still just feel really good in myself. And I think that's kind of the whole point of even being creative.
It'll often be the same names as well. So I think when it is the same people, it's so hard not to compare, because you're like, oh, they got it again. And it's like, oh, it's just that constant reminder.
Totally.
Because if it was loads of different people, I don't think it would be as kind of focused.
It's true. And I think this is another thing that Sabotage led me to. So I wrote the book in 2019, well, the essay, and then it came out last year in the bigger format. And then weirdly, I got really into the topic, like even more after I wrote the book. So I'm kind of gutted now that I haven't included some of it in it, but I got really into Eckhart Tolle. I got really into Byron Katie, Martha Beck, Mo Gaudat, like all these people I'd kind of heard of, but I got super into them last year. And everything around observing your thoughts, not believing your thoughts, questioning if things are true before you go into a spiral. And so, if someone who you think is better than you is getting all the jobs, I think if you sit with that and actually say, are they better than you? Like, is that actually true? Do you know that's true for sure? Maybe not. Maybe there's other reasons why they got it. Maybe it wasn't right for you. Maybe something else better will come along. Or, you can, I think that's what I've really learned, is that you get a thought and it doesn't mean it's actually true.
Yeah, I think I've always been quite good at doing, like, being on the good side of that. So if something happens good to someone else, I'll generally try and think of multiple reasons why that's happened. And like, well, maybe they know someone in a better area, or like, because like most times people get stuff through friends, and especially I think the art world really struggles with this, because a lot of times you'll get someone who's really, really talented, and then because it's like a physical thing, you can see the difference between that painting and that painting. You're like, well, how is that person successful? How are they selling these paintings, getting these jobs, when my work is definitely better than theirs? It's not fair. And then people get stuck in that, like, oh, this is just frustrated, and then they just kind of get annoyed and upset. Whereas actually, if you think, well, why are they getting it? They probably just know someone who can get them in that position. And then thinking, well, that's what I have to do then to get into that position. It's not just a matter of who can create the best art. It's who can create a way to kind of get that to the world and to sell it.
Yeah, because I think we spoke maybe on the first one that we did about how actresses and actors are getting more roles if they have more followers on Instagram. And we were like debating whether that was fair. And then actually I think we were discussing that that's the world we live in. Unfortunately, that's the game you have to play. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's wrong. And I think that's important to understand in the creative art world, is who gets to validate it anyway. Like Van Gogh sold no paintings. He could not find one person that liked his work. Doesn't mean it's not good. But I think you can sabotage yourself by getting really bitter about things.
Yeah,
I see it
100%.
in people all the time. I see it and I understand it. The whole, this person knows someone, or that person got that and I didn't. And I think that can keep you quite small as well. So you have to work past that as well.
I love what you said a minute ago about basically wanting everyone to succeed. And I totally empathize. And I think everyone, probably most people that have got a podcast, have that thing that you have of like, once you've discovered it for yourself, this kind of need of like, come on, you could do it. Like, and wanting other people to do it. There's something so energizing about empowering people to do that. It's of everything I've done. Me and Adam were talking last week about legacy, and really, I think like the more people you can help, that forms your legacy, and how people sort of what you leave behind is like how many people you can touch in a positive way. And I just think that obsession, once you have found the success, you sort of need to find the success for yourself first, and then once you have done that, the sharing of that with others, of how they can find that success, is absolutely intoxicating. And I think we're all obsessed with that.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And I think that you can really kind of, like you say, you almost have to sow your seeds first. And then you want to kind of get everyone on board, because you think, well, I've learned all this stuff and I want you to know this. And I think coming from that place of abundance and not scarcity is something I've been working on. Like the world is infinite, time is infinite, the universe is infinite, our creativity is infinite. So to try and be like, this is mine and this is only mine, like that would be a horrible way to live, I think.
Yeah, I think my favorite phrase to describe all of that is one that Viv Groskop said, that was lift as you climb. And I think that's just such a nice thought of like, when you're going up, always bringing people with you as well, because it's like, life is a ladder and people are at all different stages of that. So if you can do anything to help them up to the next one, even if that's getting them above you, like it's just going to help, because hopefully if you get them above you, they're going to then help you up as well. So it's just like any way that people can help each other is just so important.
Once you have found that success and you have all of those things that you described, you can still, you're like, obviously you want to share it, but you still have your kind of down moments of doubting yourself. And that's I loved Sabotage because you wrote it like fresh off the heels of Olive, because I couldn't believe it when you dropped it. I think I saw on Twitter when I was randomly scrolling one day, and you just were like, oh, new book out, and I was like, what? But you only just bloody put out the last one. But obviously, I mean, yeah, there was probably a gap of time in between there, but you just released it, and then Sabotage came like hot on the heels. But I loved it so much because it was kind of because it came so close to Olive. You talk so much in the book about everything that you went through in writing Olive, and how you doubted yourself, and how you sabotaged yourself in the writing of your own novel.
Yeah, because I mean, Stephen Pressfield talks about the resistance being fear that you dance about. You dance around the fear because it's actually pinpointing the thing you want the most. And I've always wanted to write fiction, and it was my resistance, I suppose. That was where my inner critic got really loud, and I write about that in Sabotage. And I actually wrote a lot more, and it got edited out because they were like, this is a diary entry at this point. I don't think the reader needs to know all of that stuff. But the point was that I had a bit of a freak out, and rang my agent, was like, I don't want to do it. I basically made up an excuse, and I lied. I outwardly lied and said I don't want to do it. And it was really weird. It was like an out of body experience. Like I was looking at myself from like a bird's eye view. I was like, what are you doing? Why are you like canceling like a meeting? This is weird. I was running away. It was really strange. And I know that people might roll their eyes and be like, oh, boo-hoo, you and your novel. But you can enter in something else in place of the novel, which was my thing. But I was terrified of it. And I think it's because it was genuinely my dream from when I was like 5 years old. And what happens with sabotage is sometimes we sabotage things because we're not necessarily scared of rejection. We're scared of our dreams coming true, which sounds weird, but it's true. Like Brené Brown talks about it a lot, how the most frightening emotion for humans is actually joy. It's not negativity and darkness and depression. It's actually our own joy is frightening because it means it can be taken away, which is why, you know, I don't know personally, but why having children is meant to be terrifying because you love them so much. And so for me, I was turning my back on the very thing I wanted. So got there in the end.
So you touched upon something there that was a piece of advice that you gave in the book about how just speaking in the third person to yourself can be a really good way to kind of get out of your own head. I feel like that's something that so many more people should do, because you do just live in your own head and it becomes this spiral. And taking that step back and kind of being able to say to yourself, like you're a different person talking to yourself, what would you do in this situation? Because a lot of times if you said to yourself, like, well, if my friend was in this situation, what would I say to them? Like, it just is so effective.
Yeah, it really is. And I remember realizing it, that I was doing it to myself, that I was being awful to myself. I remember writing like 20,000 words of the novel and just thinking, this is awful, this is rubbish, I'm not going to show anyone, this is like, what am I doing? And then I remember that night, one of my really close friends texted me saying, Emma, I've just done 20,000 words of my book. Like, what do you think? Am I making progress with this? And I just wrote back saying, that's amazing. You're a third way in. You have to keep going. You've broken the seal. You're in. Like, carry on. And I read it and I was like, why am I not saying this to myself? It's hard to, but the contrast was huge.
We give so much advice to other people all the time, yet it can always be so hard to just take on that advice yourself. And yeah, it's like we were talking before this episode started and you were telling me about something and I was like, you just need to take your own advice. Like, I've literally just been listening to your book and you've given yourself the answer within that book. So I think sometimes like going back and listening to things that you've written before, or just like, just speaking to yourself like it's that third person will just make such a difference.
Yeah, well, it'd be weird if I was like, I'm going to Google my own quotes tonight. But I know what you mean. Because I think with the multi-hyphen method, I wrote it because I wanted the book to exist. I went on Amazon and tried to buy a book about being a multi-hyphenate. It didn't exist. So I was like, okay, I'm going to write this book. But then people were treating me like I had all the answers. And they were like, well, I bet you never struggle. I bet you're amazing at working from home. I bet you never have any down days. And I thought, God, do people really think that about authors? Because you do know we wrote the book because we were struggling. That's why it happens.
Have you seen a massive uptick in conversations around multi-hyphen life since lockdown?
I have, yeah, which was really interesting. And how strange that the world has changed so much in a couple of years, because in 2018 when it came out, I remember having to really sell it. not that I was on a campaign, but I was having to sell the idea of flexible working. I was having to say, this is why multiple income streams is a safer bet than a 9-to-5. This is why working from home can be great for some people. And I just remember going on like some BBC podcasts with hosts that were a lot older than me, and they didn't really understand it. And now I'm thinking, well, we're in the global experiment now of being more multi-hyphenate. So I'm not saying it's the answer, but I just think it's become a bit more mainstream now. And I'm just so glad that we're having conversations about how work is broken finally. I don't think people really wanted to admit how broken it was. They were trying to like paper over the cracks. Lots of CEOs didn't want to say, oh yeah, this is all broken. They just wanted to keep people coming to work, get the bums on seats. And now the jig is up, really.
Yeah, and I think the multi-hyphen thing, especially like for me and David, if we didn't have that in our lives, this last year would have been completely different for us. It was the fact that because we do dip our toes into so many different things, then some things quietened down, but allowed us to continue on the other things. If we just had all of our eggs in one basket, if that was the wrong basket, it would have been a very, very different year for us last year compared to what it actually went like.
Mm. Yeah, and I think we need to give people more training in this space. I'm not saying that everyone wants to be, a painter / doctor / pottery maker. Like, obviously the multi-hyphen method is full of those examples, but I do think that we should be telling people and showing people how to pivot during times like this. It would have been quite useful, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's not that kind of example of like a doctor and an artist, things that are so different. It's like everything that we do is relatively in the same field, just kind of like like brothers or sisters next to it rather than like cousins away.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think whatever you're doing, there will be stuff that you can spread into that isn't too far from what you're doing now. Even if like it's just the skill set that you have, you might be able to take that into something else and really like just develop a new skill that you wouldn't have thought you could do until you actually start doing it. And you're like, oh, actually, yeah, this is quite similar to the other thing that I do.
Totally.
It's been interesting to see people who are obviously in industries that are really negatively impacted. So food, for example, and then seeing people doing online cookery classes and just the way that people have managed to even in an industry that's really, really severely hit by this. Because obviously there's such a wide spectrum of like disasters that have gone on that some of us have been able to thrive, and then others have like really had to think very creatively to in order to survive. I mean, I think we're all just treading water at this point, but hopefully a lot of those skills will be transferable as we come out of this into whatever we go into, because work has completely changed now.
Yeah, it has. And it's amazing how quickly we all have adapted, I think. That's quite one thing that's amazing about humans. I think we do adapt. It's taken
Yeah.
a while, but now, the fact that we're doing this podcast like this, at first I did find it hard. Now I probably will do this now.
Yeah. Same.
Which is a shame, because I like seeing people in person, but the amount of time I have got back from commuting or from, just the kind of bits in around town. Is that what you call it? But yeah, just like running around London, I think we are streamlining. The only thing I worry about is that I think there is a trend where people cut down and they're like, great, I've got like 2 hours back. And then they just add that 2 hours of more work.
Yeah.
And so
100%.
that's been the challenge for me at the moment is I don't want to be more productive just because I can be. I want to make sure that I'm using my time in the best possible way.
Yeah, and I think it's working out what's important to you and making sure you have time for that as well. Like we were talking earlier about like just going to the pub and being with your friends and like being around in different places, making sure that actually now, if you can save 3 hours in a week because you don't have to travel somewhere to do a podcast compared to doing it online, then you make sure that that 3 hours goes towards spending, when we can, spending time in the pub with your friends, doing the things that actually bring you joy rather than just getting into this cycle of like, oh, I've got 3 more hours to do more work, which is then going to just, because if you've got 3 more hours to do more work, and you're already busy and at capacity, that's probably going to bring in more work that's then you're probably going to say yes to, and it's just going to become this massive stress ball that will just explode in years' time, which I think was happening before COVID hit. People would kind of getting to that stage of everything's optimized. I'm taking on so much stuff. And that's why like so many people are burning out. And I feel like burnout has been such a massive word over the past couple of years because we've optimized too much.
Burnout has really happened last year. I know quite a few people that have had to take quite a bit of time off now because of 2020. And I think that like you say, it was like the optimizing of every single 5 minutes, but it was also the panic of if you did have work, you felt like, well,
Yeah.
I better do loads of it then because I'm lucky and I've got work. And there was also the panic of, the financial side of things. Like I did not make as much money last year as I made the year before. Not nearly. Like it was really scary, and I'm extremely privileged and can absolutely live on the money I make. But you just have this feeling of, okay, oh God, I've got to make up for that then. But burnout as well isn't necessarily the workload anyway, it's the anxiety behind the workload. And so
Yeah.
people were burning out not necessarily because they had like 5 Zooms a day, which is really difficult, but it was just the mental load, the adjustment, the fact that our brains aren't used to it. We're burning out for so many more reasons beyond work at this point. And I think finishing the workday early has been really good for a lot of people I know. They're just like, do you know what? The workday needs to be shorter then.
Do you take Fridays off as well?
I do, yeah. Well, I say off. It's meant to be my day to read articles that I've saved up, to listen to podcasts, just a day which is worky. It's still worky, but just not in the traditional sense, I suppose.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, me and Adam have talked about this before, but I have a day that I spend with my girlfriend,
I love that.
and because that's another. I mean, because she used to work here, like we would be together every day, 24/7, and then all of a sudden we weren't anymore because I was still coming into paint. So we carved out that time because a relationship is just as important as work and all of the other things, and it still does need time. So rather than just sort of trying to cram an hour in here or there, it's like Saturdays are our days together and is our day together, and that's our time. So sectioning, and I think it's especially when it comes to creatives, like having that schedule of this is, and like we've hit on it a number of times here of like, here's my half an hour to scroll Instagram, here's my day with my girlfriend, here's my whatever. It's like, here's my day to do podcasts and articles. Like having those set times is there's freedom in the discipline.
Mm-hmm.
I see what you mean. Yeah, it's funny because I wouldn't say I have a routine. I'm not a routine-y person. My weeks are so different from one to the next. I don't really have that kind of Mondays are like this, Tuesdays like that. I do have Fridays that are this day that's blocked out, but it did make me more aware of this last year, that maybe it is good to have set times for things, and it makes you feel a bit more empowered. But like you say, it's not this is my diary and it cannot be changed. It's just giving yourself pockets of time to add with the chaos, if that makes sense, which has worked well for me, actually.
It's like when you're planning what you're going to do that week, working out, well, I've got 3 hours that I have to allocate to being down in the pub with my friends. And that has to go in, and I need to put that in first. And I think maybe even deciding what priority things have to you, like making sure that those things that are easy to just let go have a higher priority. So you make sure you slot them in before you fit everything else around it. Because I think like the whole work-life balance thing, it's good to be able to set up a life that you are doing the things that bring you joy first, and then you fit in the work around them. Because if it becomes the other way, then it's easy for them to just kind of go by the wayside. Like me and David were talking the other week about what our word for the year would be. And David said legacy and I said friendships, because I think this year I want to make sure that I spend a lot more time like with my, like talking to my friends and like interacting with the people that I meet on the podcast. And like I've built so many friendships over the past few years that it's easy to start them, but then it's nurturing them and making sure that they continue. And I think just from this conversation, I think what I might do going forward is making sure that I hit, say, 3 hours a week talking to the people that I want to be talking to, and making sure that I schedule those in beforehand, rather than just me saying, oh, I'm going to do 3 hours and then just have it in the back of my head, carry on working and be like, oh, I actually don't have any time today to do it.
Yeah, working that way around. Because that reminds me actually of something. So I got a life coach last year because I felt like I was ready to. I didn't think I needed therapy, but I needed like a person that I could talk to who wasn't my friends and wasn't my colleagues. It's funny, isn't it, that you like pay someone to listen to your problems, but that's sort of what I needed. And she helped me do exactly that, which was create this life calendar of things full of the things you want to prioritize, because I had fallen into the trap of just responding to things. I wasn't actively planning my life. I was just responding to other people's demands.
Yeah.
And she had got me into this thing of color coding my calendar. It was green for work and pink for social. And she was like, I want to see equal amounts of green and pink, because that was also what I wanted, and it's changed everything for me. And they both feed each other. I just feel so much happier. And sometimes you just need someone to come into your life and just give you a tool like that.
Doing that visually, I think, is would help a lot of people. So if you're listening to this and you just carry it all in your head, because that's what I do. I carry everything in my brain, and my brain's not that reliable.
It's not
much to Adam's like despair. But yeah, I think having that visually, being able to see it, just allows you to quantify it so much, and in that will allow you to be more protective of your time. And one of the things that you say in Sabotage is, and it's just like a little throwaway thing that I wrote down because I was like, that's actually really important that I wanted to ask you about, is you're sabotaging yourself when you're saying yes to people that you should be saying no to.
God, that's such a hard one that I've had to learn. I'm such a people pleaser deep down, and I'm sure there's all sorts of childhood things that I could analyze there, but saying no is really hard for a lot of people, but I especially couldn't do it. I actually have.
That's why we've got you on the podcast 3 years in a row.
No, always got time for you guys. I've turned down a lot this year, and I feel really icky about it. Like I hate it. I hate saying no to people. It just makes me feel like I'm going in the wrong direction. But I have to say no to things. Otherwise, I'm not going to get any work done. But it's just one of those things where, you have to learn how to do it in a way that you feel comfortable with. And I literally have a template of responses. And I copy and paste. I mean, I make them my own, but it's like the way that I have to say no. I was sabotaging myself. That was it. I was sabotaging myself by saying maybe a lot, because that is just not. It's just not fair on people. And I blame Mark Zuckerberg for the maybe button on Facebook, because that made us all flakes. It made us all go, maybe I'll come to your party. And then you're just the worst friend in the world, because they're like, do I get food for you? Are you coming?
Yeah.
And you're just like, maybe. So I've got really good now at saying yes or no. And that is good.
Yeah, that reminds me of like, it's just a random flashback I've had of being in Asia somewhere and like getting off a kind of a touristy bus, and there's always kind of like the locals there trying to sell you stuff or take you to somewhere to sell you something. And I remember reading something being like, if anyone ever asks you something, just say yes or no. Don't say maybe or the worst, I will later.
Oh, that was what I said, and they always circle back.
Because then you've basically made a promise to them. And we were in a situation where, similar, like a few days later, actually, the similar thing happened where we were sat at a table having some lunch, and there was a couple of girls sat over there, and one of these people came up to me like, "Oh, so you're going to buy now?" And they were like, you could just see them being like, "Oh shit, I didn't expect these people to come back." And they were like, "Oh no, but you said you would." And then it was like this real problem where they ended up having to buy stuff, and because they kind of got pressured into it. But it was like, if they'd have just,
because we're that scared of the word no.
But I remember Liz Gilbert saying that she has to say no now, because if you say maybe later, or you say, "Oh, I'm not around on that date," or "Oh, I don't know if I can do it for this reason," they always come back and say, "Well, we'll give you more money," or "Can you do it on another date?" Or "Okay, well, if you can't fly there, maybe we can do it digitally." Or so just say no. Just say no.
Being protective of your time is really important, and I'm the same as you. I've got copy and paste templates that I send out now, and it's been a real relief, because I am the same as you. I would say yes to a lot of stuff, and I think it's a 2020 thing, is having been through that year and being able to now to prioritize and just going, it's a Marie Kondo on it, and just is this going to bring me joy?
It is really simple when you think about it, but I don't know if I would have been so clear on what I'm trying to achieve without 2020, which is really weird. I was thinking, like, in this parallel world, what would I be like right now if 2020 had been normal? And actually, I think I prefer this version of me, which is kind of a strange thing to say, but I think it's true. I think I would have got really whisked up in a lot of things last year, and actually I didn't. And I've been able to understand what brings me joy in a much less materialistic way.
I just wonder, like, we can say all of these like positive things that we've taken from it. It's going to be so tempting when the world gets back to normal, because I do believe that it will get back to like completely normal. I wonder how much we will remember. It's almost like we should write those letters, that like a letter from 2020 that you seal and then you open it in 5 years time or something, to just check back in of like, remember what is important, because this has been the time where we can really work that out, and we can have that time with ourselves to find our priorities, and let's not forget those.
I know what you mean, but I love hearing when people say, I think the world will get back to normal, because somehow I can't imagine it yet, but I know that you're right, it will. But I think deep down, when you go through something traumatic, because we've all gone through like a collective trauma, I don't think that ever leaves you. I mean, maybe it will, but I was listening to someone actually on a podcast recently, the host of On Being, I think she's called Krista something, but she was saying that when she had depression, she got better and she kind of, it went away, quote unquote. But she says that like if you've gone to the darkest place and you've had clinical depression, it never leaves you, and you're always the person that knows that that's there. And I kind of, not, and maybe it's a bad comparison, but I feel like what we've been through will be a part of us now forever.
I suppose it's like, do we address the problem or not? Or do we just kind of think like, oh, that happened? But it's like, well, that happened. And then it's actually analysing, I think, what was good, what was bad, and then what we could do different going forwards. Because I think where stuff really kind of like dwells and like sticks in your brain is when you've never really confronted it. And I suppose it is important to confront it and then work out, well, that happened and I can't change the fact that that happened. So what can I do about that going forward?
Yeah, and what can you apply in your life moving forward? I mean, for me, it is the ability to know what being present actually means. People would always say, be present, be in the moment. And like we hear that all the time, don't we? It's just part of culture, like be in the moment, be present. I've realized now that 2020 put us all into this boot camp of having to be present. There was nothing else. We didn't have anything to look forward to. We had to literally sit in our own stuff. And I think it has reminded us that the future doesn't really matter. Like this being alive right now matters. And I think that was just a real test for everyone. Is like, we're not in control. The world does its thing. The universe does its thing. The seasons change. Like we just kind of move, like the world's in control kind of thing. And I think human beings think that we can control things. Like we think that we can magic up things, but we can't. So it was quite humbling, I think, for everyone. I mean, for me.
It's like when you experience nature in like a true sense, like if you're stood at a foot of a mountain, or if you witness like waves during a giant storm, or I think most people at some point, if you're lucky enough to have been outside when a big natural thing is going on, then most people have experienced something like that, unless you've always lived in a town or a city and you've never actually left. But when you are in those moments, it is a reminder of like, just how tiny we are. And I think that's what makes me, it's this weird thing in my head that makes me feel like everything that we do is so important, because it's so meaningless. It's actually like really, really important that we lift up other people. So it's kind of full circle of what we were talking about before. But like we have got this time. We are these sentient beings on this rock in this crazy, ridiculous world that can throw a virus that none of us can see, that will infect the world, and thousands of people will die, and we'll all be touched by it, and we'll all know someone that has caught it or been negatively affected by it. And it's just, we are completely powerless. So in a way, we need to have this power of lifting and inspiring others.
Absolutely.
Or am I just on another planet?
No, I think for me, this really chimes in with everything I've ever done in terms of like the message in my books, which is do it now. Make your thing. Go and start your project. Because this culture that we're in of someone in a suit with a clipboard saying, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time, is bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, no one knows. I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years' time. I don't think you guys know where you're going to be in. Like, you live a life of just adapting and creating and moving and zigzagging. And I guess for anyone listening, I suppose it is just that the whole YOLO thing, like it's kind of quite real right now.
I don't think I've ever been as excited for a future 5 years as I am that now, though, because I just feel that I understand the game now, and it's what I wish for everyone that listens to this show. And it's what, when I did my episode the other week, it was kind of the point that I wanted everyone to take away from it, is that everything comes down to you, and it's all about what you make, and just keep making. And eventually you'll make the right things that will resonate with the right people, and that will have a positive impact on your life, and then it will have a positive impact on other people's lives.
It must have been really interesting for you, because for both of you, but with your work being shared online, because even though there's less people probably in Shoreditch or wherever, like walking past your work, your work has gone viral during this time. I mean, has that been a surprise?
You're doing the classic Emma Gannon of interviewing
Sorry,
me
and
now.
you guys are actually coming on my podcast, so maybe I should save it.
We'll save it, but yeah, no, it's been insane, and I think that that's the internet. The internet is absolutely wonderful, and even when none of us could go anywhere, I could walk to the studio within 10 minutes. I could isolate up on the roof, and I'll never forget those days because even though we're in tier 4 lockdown now, it's not the same. And I go up on the roof and I can see lots of people walking around and loads of cars, and it's very busy in Shoreditch. But there were some days where, there was a long stretch of time where I was alone on top of that roof and I didn't see another human for hours and hours and hours and hours. And I just was in my own space and created completely solo. And then I'd put it online and thousands of people would see it. And that was a trip. It was crazy. So, but crazy fun, and has created loads of opportunities, and I'm very, very grateful for it.
So inspiring, because that's exactly, it's like we've got a Wi-Fi connection and we've got ideas, and I truly believe that is all we need, but it's just getting it out there, and that's amazing.
100%. So given that you wrote the book on Sabotage, do you feel pressure now to like, because you know all this stuff, like do you throw up a red flag as soon as you spot one of these behaviors in yourself?
Yeah,
now?
I do. And it's funny because I wrote the book and obviously interviewed all these psychologists, and it's like having a podcast. It's like I write the book under the guise of I'm writing a book, but really I just want to bring up all these psychologists. I'm like, can you sort me out? I mean I'm writing a book. So yeah, I do think it's massively changed me now, and I just know myself, and that is really something I encourage everyone to do in whatever way you can, is notice your own patterns, notice your own habits, just call yourself out a little bit, be like, oh, you're doing that thing again, and do not beat yourself up, because sometimes I do it and I think I know I'm doing it and I let myself do it because I'm just kind of being kind to myself in a way of like, I know that like maybe I shouldn't have that third glass of wine, but I don't go to that extent of like reining that in. I'm just aware. It's like the observing your thoughts thing. And I guess that's what meditation is. Just being aware, being in control. I think that's all you can do, really.
Yeah, just understanding the way your body works and it responds to stuff is the key that I think everyone needs to do as soon as possible. Because the sooner you can get to grips with that, the sooner you're like self-aware, and then that just changes every single thing that you do, because you realize that like we're relatively simple as human beings and we all act in very similar ways to other people. So it's like as soon as we can work out how we work, then okay, that's sorted, and then you can carry on and get on with everything else.
Exactly. It's like just knowing your own little hacks that no one else really needs to know about. It's just knowing if you need the morning walk, or knowing that actually if you're going to write 500 words of your book, maybe you don't want to go on Instagram that morning because maybe seeing other people doing their thing puts you off. I think it's just protecting yourself as much as possible so that you can create this environment to be your best self. And that is so different for all of us. For some people it's being teetotal and never drinking. For some people, it's not being on Facebook. For some people, it's, making sure they go on like a 2-hour walk. Like we've all got these little things that light us up and make us happy. And I think it's up to us to work out what they are. And the same with the sabotage thing. Like I know what things I know now. It's really funny because it's like a golden retriever with a ball. If there's certain thoughts that all of us have where if you go on it, it just goes round and round and round like a dog chasing. Like it's just constant loop. And the trick is to find a way to quieten that loop. The minute that you can quieten that horrible negative thing that goes round and round and round, you're just away. You're going to write like 1 million books or whatever your thing is.
Yeah.
It's like all in your head. And that's what sabotage is about is, we can turn down these things. We can do it. It's just that we were never taught. We were never taught this stuff at school. I wish that someone had sat me down and gone, by the way, your brain is going to be a massive part of your life. And if you look after it, you'll be fine. But no, they teach you about what way a river runs and about rocks.
Yeah. I feel like a good thing that you could do is probably like just set your, if like whatever your hobby, passion is, whatever it is you want to do, set yourself kind of like a relatively outlandish challenge for this year. And then, or next, and then break that down into like maybe months or something. So you've got like I want to write 1,000 words in the next month, something like that. And then if that doesn't happen, then be like, what was it that stopped that happening? Because then you can start to like, that's when you'll start to become self-aware, when you realize, oh, actually, well, I spent 6 hours on Instagram that day. You just look on your phone and just see how many hours you spent on each app and stuff, and be like, well, that's what's stopping me achieving my dreams. So it's like, just set yourself a dream, set yourself a goal, try and achieve it, and then, but make sure it's kind of like quite a hard one. So it's not just like, oh, you can do it in 5 minutes. And then when you don't achieve that, then ask yourself, what was it that stopped that? Next month, try and take those out, try again. Did anything else stop it? A couple of things. And then eventually you'll get to a point where, yeah, you've got these habits, you've got these routines that allow you to just head forward in the way that you actually want to go.
Absolutely. And it's really key knowing where you want to go. Because I think some people get trapped in that productivity, but they actually like don't really want to be doing it, and so they just beat themselves up about it. Because I remember listening to Martha Beck once, and she writes a book like every 4 years. Like she writes a book, well, she has big gaps in between her books, and she was saying on a podcast that some people write like 2 books a year. She has like all these friends that do that, and she was thinking, oh, it's hard sometimes because I compare myself. And I was like, Martha Beck, Oprah Winfrey's life coach, she compares herself. What? But what she was saying is she has a son who needs a lot of attention. She wants to spend her life looking after her son and writing her books. But it was amazing hearing someone just say what their goal is and achieving the goal. The goal wasn't to write a bazillion books. The goal is to live the life that you want. So I think it's important to know what you want and then go and chase it, rather than just like, I want to be famous or I want to do this, you know?
Boom. Thank you so much. Where can people find you online?
Thank you so much for having me. I hope we'll be doing this until we're all 90. So my website's emmagannon.co.uk, where you'll find my newsletter, all my books and everything. And I think I'll just leave it there for now.
Boom. Thank you
Amazing.
so much.
Thank you so much.
You.